Did you know that the book of Isaiah was quoted in the New Testament more than any other Old Testament book except for Psalms? Isaiah also foretold about the coming Messiah more than any other. The book of Isaiah can be divided into two major themes, judgment and salvation. In this video, we will see what Isaiah has to say about judgment and salvation, and then we will see some examples of Isaiah's prophecies about the future Messiah. The first of Isaiah's two major themes, judgment, is primarily found in chapters 1 through 39. Chapter 1 begins with God proclaiming that his own people have rebelled against him. God refers to Judah, his people, as his own children who God himself reared and brought up. God makes a comparison with an ox and a donkey, stating that even these animals know their owners, yet God's own children do not know him. This sets the stage for the judgments God will pronounce. One major thing that continues to bring God's judgment in these chapters is that while Judah claimed to belong to God, they continuously trusted in any and everything else other than God. They would trust in things like empty, vain religious activity, their possessions and wealth, military strength, other nations for protection, pagan practices like fortune-telling, sorcery, and astrology, and false gods or idols. They continued to rebel and sin against God, and then instead of repenting and calling on the Lord, they would trust in all these other things for protection and salvation. For that, God would bring severe judgment on them that would be described as a devouring or consuming fire. Not only would God pronounce judgment on Judah and Israel, but in chapters 13 through 23, he would pronounce judgments on all the nations of the earth, showing that he alone is Lord and the one true God over all. All other supposed gods are just worthless man-made idols that can do nothing. This section of Isaiah ends with Isaiah prophesying of Judah's future captivity in Babylon, which would fulfill God's judgment on the nation. Chapters 40 through 66 focus more on the theme of salvation. This section can really be divided into three smaller sections. Chapters 40 through 48 are about God rescuing his people from Babylonian captivity. Chapters 49 through 57 have to do with the promised Messiah, and chapters 58 through 66 are regarding the final glory of God's people and his everlasting kingdom. Chapter 39 left off with a bleak prophecy regarding Judah's future captivity in Babylon, a prophecy that Isaiah had roughly 100 years in advance. Now, chapter 40 begins a much more pleasant and comforting message for God's people even further in the future when their captivity in Babylon will end. You would think that after God's people were devastated by his judgment for their sin, and now were experiencing his mercy and grace in saving them from Babylonian captivity, that they would be thankful to God and want to be God's servant who bears witness to the nations about who God is. Instead, they refuse to do so and they complain about God. So God tells of another servant that he will raise up one day. Of this servant, God says, "Behold, my servant whom I uphold, my chosen, in whom my soul delights. I have put my spirit upon him. He will bring forth justice to the nations." This servant of the Lord, who would bring forth justice to the nations, is the promised Messiah who has been predicted throughout the book of Isaiah. In fact, the Messiah is referred to in chapters 7, 9, 11, 40, 42, 49, 50, 52, 53, and 60. Isaiah 7 says that he will be born of a virgin and that he will be called Emmanuel, which means God with us. Chapter 9 says that this Messiah will be a great light and that he would be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. This chapter also reveals that this Messiah will establish and uphold his kingdom with justice and righteousness, and that it will be an eternal kingdom that never ends. Chapter 53 reveals the unexpected way the Messiah would bring about salvation for his people. It says that he would be rejected and despised by his own people. This Messiah would go through terrible suffering, and people would see it and assume that he was being punished by God for his own sin. But he was pierced for our transgressions, he was crushed for our iniquities. Upon him was the chastisement that brought us peace, and by his wounds we are healed. All we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned every one to his own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. This Messiah would not try to defend himself, but rather he would voluntarily suffer for the sins of his people. This Messiah would die bearing the sins of many, and yet somehow he would be alive again after this, as his days are prolonged and he makes intercession for transgressors. Only one person has so clearly fulfilled all these messianic prophecies given in Isaiah, and that is the Lord Jesus Christ himself, who was sent by God to live the perfect, righteous life we all fail to, bear the punishment we deserve for our sin, die in our place on the cross, and then rise from the dead in victory over sin and death. Our Messiah, Jesus, is our mighty God who rules and reigns over all and will establish his eternal kingdom in justice and righteousness. He will be our everlasting light, and in his kingdom there will be perfect peace and no more suffering or death. Throughout the book of Isaiah, we see the supreme holiness of God. We see his absolute power and complete sovereignty. We see his justice and divine wrath against sinners. We see his mercy, grace, love, and compassion to the undeserving. We see that he alone is the one true God and that he is always trustworthy. He will rule and reign forever. So instead of living in rebellion against him, instead of putting your trust in everything except him, seek the Lord while he may be found. Call upon him while he is near. Let the wicked forsake his way, and the unrighteous man his thoughts. Let him return to the Lord, that he may have compassion on him, and to our God, for he will abundantly pardon.